Coming up on the program, we're going to plant our tomatoes and give you all the secrets that we follow that allow us to have a wonderful harvest come later this summer. The Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener is sponsored by the following. MIgardener.com, over 300 varieties of non-GMO, heirloom, organic flowers, vegetables, and herb seeds, all for 99 cents. MIgardener.com. Sioux Growing Supply, located in Wausau, Wisconsin, focusing on certified leaf compost, an excellent amendment for poor soil. With their new garden blend, improving soil structure in clay and sandy soil, great for creating new garden beds. Also available from Sioux's, pre-filled trays and pots with professional potting soil mix or organic rice hull-based potting soil mix. Bag and bulk of certified leaf compost also available. Visit SiouxGrowingSupply.com. Stop before you dig. Call Digger's Hotline first. Call 3 business days before you dig. It's the law. It's completely free and it's for your safety. Know what's below before you dig. It's your responsibility. Call Digger's Hotline or visit them at diggershotline.com. HappyLeafLED.com. Commercial grade grow light with a home gardener's affordability. No fans, no motors. Simply plug in and grow. Great for seed starting to lettuce to full grown tomatoes. All indoors. HappyLeafLED.com.
Sustain Natural Fertilizer, offering superior organic plant foods that deliver research-proven results. Trusted by farmers, growers, and gardeners for 30 years. Learn more at sustain.com.
Welcome to the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener. I'm Joey Baird. We are in a front yard garden and we're going to plant tomatoes. Now, what I have done prior to the time of planting is I've worked the soil underneath this tarp. We've had a lot of rain, and after I worked it, I didn't want it to get all soggy and wet and muddy. It's hard to plant tomatoes when you have to fight the mud. So I put the tarp down. We had about an inch of rain. I'm going to pull the tarp off gently so the water goes away, and then the soil should be relatively able to work without a whole lot of issues, a whole lot of clumping, because you don't really want to work with wet soil because it will dry in big clods and it does nobody any good. So I'm going to first do this, and then we will get to planting our heirloom and organic tomatoes. So that worked really, really well. You can see the difference in the soil here that wasn't covered and the soil that was covered. Now it still was on the damp side, but nothing like it would be trying to work in soil that had an inch of rain on in the last 24 hours. So what I'm holding here is a tool that we have found to be very beneficial, efficient, and speedy when it comes to planting tomatoes. It is called a post hole digger. This is not a requirement of a tool that is needed for planting tomatoes, but I'll show you in just a moment how effective it is and the benefits that it holds to planting tomatoes. If you're going to plant a lot like we plant 50 to 70 tomatoes a year, this makes a great difference in the speed. Now what we're going to do is going to plant these tomatoes, and this holds true the same whether you're in a raised bed, traditional ground like we are in, or in a container. The concept is the same, just the location may be different based on where you're planting them. You want full sun, you want your soil temperature at root zone, not surface, to be at least 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Any colder than that, it really is going to shock the roots. If you've got your tomatoes hardened off correctly or acclimated to the outdoor temperatures, then shouldn't be an issue. You might see a slight shock. Now, what we're fortunate enough to have today is very cloudy conditions to plant our tomatoes. This is one of the pieces of advice that a lot of gardeners will give you when you're planting or transplanting your starts is a cloudy day, no direct sunlight. Direct sunlight, if you have no other option, it'll be fine on the plants. It's just a little less of a shock when you have cloud cover. It gives them more time to get accustomed to the location that you're planting them in. Now, if you don't have a post hole digger, you can use just a traditional shovel or a garden trowel. The reason why this is beneficial is we've got our tray of tomatoes here. We've got our tray of tomatoes here that we have started and transferred over into the root maker trays. And they're very long, not so much leggy because we've had them under LED light. They're very thick stemmed, and I'll remove this. And you can see the advantages to growing in the root maker cells. You don't have that traditional wraparound root system that you normally would in a traditional nursery pot. So We want to plant them deep. This holds true to all tomatoes, excluding grafted tomatoes and or if you plant the ketchup and french fries tomatoes. Neither one we would recommend for a variety of different reasons that I won't get into right now. Tomatoes will produce roots anywhere that soil touches the stem. You may even see bumps along the stem after you've planted it or in the tray. Those are roots that are trying to form because they've been in a very moist environment, humidity-wise, and they're trying to put roots on even though there is no soil for them to root into. So we want to plant deep. I recommend about 75% of the plant going in the ground. Now this is an exception to the rule here. Our plants are very tall. They're about 14, 15 inches in height. Your normal nursery tomatoes that you'll buy at your garden center will only be about 8 inches in height, typically. And you'd want to plant them about 5 to 6 inches in depth and leave 2 inches on top. If you get too deep and you don't have enough native soil, for our example here, you may be growing it in clay, and we want to avoid that. So what we'll have to do is with the post hole digger, we'll see how far we can go down before we hit very dense soil or clay soil where it's not going to be very beneficial for the roots to try to grow into it. We're using several different products here or ingredients in order to enrich the soil that we're planting our tomatoes in. We're going to dig the hole and we're going to add Epsom salt, which is magnesium sulfate. It has nothing to do with creating or allowing the tomato plant to prevent blossom end rot. What magnesium sulfate does, it helps green the plant up, allow the plant to photosynthesize better. The reason why you get blossom end rot is a lack of available calcium that the plant is not able to access in the soil because the soil is too dry. So you always want to make sure your tomatoes are watered and the soil stays damp. Otherwise, you may have all the calcium in the world in your soil, but because the soil is so dry, the roots can't access that and form the tomatoes correctly. That's where that blossom end rot comes from. We're also using sustained fertilizer, 464. That's an all-balanced fertilizer, organic, derived from turkey litter and pine bark. It's all natural, not mined, as well as whole grain yellow corn meal from Hotchins Mills, and we'll explain that when it comes to that point. So we're in a small little area here, approximately 4 foot wide by about 8 foot long, and we want to plant our tomatoes 2 foot apart. No tighter, no closer, because then there's a lot more opportunity for diseases to cross via touching. These will grow into one another, but we want to have good airflow. We want to give them some space. If I had all the space in the world, I would go every 4 foot, but we all don't have access to unlimited space. So 2 foot minimum spacing would be fine. So we'll just start up front here. And the reason why this post hole digger is so nice is it creates a hole. This is what farmers use or used to use back in before modern technology and post hole diggers were created for tractors. And you can see it just digs a nice hole. And I'm going to go down, that tomato plant, I'm wanting to go down about 9 inches. And the soil still looks relatively decent. There is some clay particles in there, but it's not like kids' clay. It's not sticking together solid, so it is allowing it to break apart. So I'm going to go a little deeper. And then I'll get a tomato over here and we'll start the planting process. So I got my hole dug. It is about 9 inches, 9 to 10 inches deep. Now what we want to do is to get a cultivator or get something to just gently scrape the sides of the hole here. Now what that allows or helps the plant do is if you dig a hole, and this is more towards if you use the post hole digger because it smooths the sides off, it sheens the sides off. So you're tearing the sides off with the cultivator, you're loosening up, you're creating caverns or divots or unnaturally smooth areas. So when we plant the tomato and it begins to root out, it doesn't hit a smooth side. It sees a variation in texture and it will go out and venture off. Unless you have extremely 100% clay soil, You do not want to backfill with all compost. You can do a 50-50 mix if that's what you want to do. The reason being is if you put this in the ground and you backfill with all compost, that root system is never going to explore into the native soil. And your native soil contains a lot of minerals and nutrients and micronutrients that the plant needs to grow. So it's just going to stay in this little hole here its entire life. If you just use the native soil or a mixture of 50-50, it's going to branch out and actually have a stronger root system. So keep that in mind. So now that we've got this planted, you can see it's not as deep as I want it to. I would like the soil level to be where my hand is, but we are down to a clay consistency where I think that we need to stop. Anything below soil grade, I want to pinch off the leaves here. They will biodegrade, they will compost in the soil, but it's just better to get rid of them. This is a red brandywine tomato. This leaf here is going to touch the soil. I want to get rid of that. You can cut them off or pinch them off. This is not going to hurt the plant at all. So the first thing I want to do is, I think we're okay there. I don't need to tease the roots on this particular plant because of the way the root maker system air prunes the roots. You can see that these roots are already loose, ready to go. Now, if it was in a traditional container that you get from your nursery, or maybe you started in a party cup, you will see wraparound where you will have to tease the roots. But with this, I don't have to. Put it in there. Now I am going to backfill here. You want to add your fertilizer or your nutrients in a moment. You don't want to put it right on top of the root system, and I'll explain why. We got good earthworms here. Put them in. I want to fill, and I want to cover the root ball that I've got first. Be gentle. You just don't want to shove this in, because even though this is a pretty dense stalk, it is fragile and it can snap. That's why we always plant well more tomatoes than we're going to need. Okay, so I've got that. Now I'm going to add the nutrients. The reason why I choose, and if you do it differently, that's you. The reason why I choose to add the nutrients an inch or two above the root system is rain, watering. It's going to percolate down into the root system. If you put it on the bottom and then set your root system on top, most of the time, a lot of that fertilizer or minerals or nutrients or whatever you're adding is going to go down into the native soil and is going to not even be around for the plant to pick up. At least this way, it gives the opportunity for it to work into the root ball of the tomato plant. So we'll add the recommended rate of sustained fertilizer. Epsom salt, I just add about 2 tablespoons around, and then now with the sustained fertilizer, follow the recommendations on the back of your fertilizer. This says 1/4 cup per transplant hole, so that's what we're going to do. And the reason why you follow the instructions, because just because it says a little, or just because the fertilizer bag says a certain quantity, if you add more, that doesn't always make it right or make it better. So follow the instructions. That's the reason why they're there. Now this is already looking very, very good. What I'm going to do is continue and finish backfilling, removing any roots or weeds that I see here, gently backfilling. And this will settle with more rain and watering. I won't water this in because there's a lot of moisture already in the soil, and 2, it's cloudy and the plant is not going to go into traumatic shock. If I was working in dry soil and a hot day, I would definitely be watering this in, and that's what you need to assess with your planting of your tomatoes or any transplant. So I'm gonna get that there. I can mount it up a little bit to get some more roots to form. All right, that looks good. Now the whole grain cornmeal from Hodgson's Mills. You can use any brand that you want. The key is yellow whole grain cornmeal. We recommend Hodgson's Mills simply because they're a sponsor of our radio show here in Milwaukee. Whole grain cornmeal, yellow whole grain cornmeal, contains a beneficial bacteria called trichoderma, which applied around the plant at the time of planting, like I'm doing here, will fight the bad bacteria in the soil, which is early blight. That's the discoloration of the leaves as the soil splashes up on them as you water, as you rain, and then by the end of the season, it's went all the way up to plant. You've got a plant with tomatoes hanging off of it and just stalks, no leaves. The leaves have all got that yellow discoloration, black blotchiness on them. That's early blight. So by doing this, and really one time is all you have to do it, we'll come back and do this maybe one more time halfway through the grow season, but this greatly reduces the amount of early blight or soil splashing up on the plant that can cause early blight. An additional precaution that we take is mulching. 90% of the problems your tomato plant will face is soil splashing up on the leaves. So as the plant grows, we will continue to trim back the bottom 6 to 8 inches and leaving just stalk. We've used the whole grain cornmeal, as well as we will mulch with leaves. If you do not have leaves still from the fall, you can use chemical-free, seed-free grass clippings or shredded paper, not that appealing, but it does work, or straw or any other type of mulch. Pine needles work well. It doesn't make your soil acidic. That's a garden myth. So I got this one planted, I'm gonna get the rest planted, and then we will come in and we will mulch with our leaves. As I'm planting tomatoes, you may have accidents, and that's what has occurred with this Elkhart Polish tomato. Now it's crimped in the stalk. I'm gonna go ahead and plant it because I've got a lot of hairs up here and I still have hairs here, and it's not fully crimped. I'm just gonna plant it in the ground just like you saw me do earlier, and it'll be just fine. All right, I've got 6 of them planted here. One thing we want to do first is use the leaves here that we got from our pear tree last fall, and I want to mulch around the tomatoes. And again, this is a barrier that protects the plants from soil splashing up on the leaves, causing that early blight, as well as a weed suppressant and a moisture retention. We won't have to water as much. And I'm going to do that to all of them, and then we'll come back and we'll cage them. All right, you can cage your tomatoes in whatever form or fashion you choose, whether you insert a stake beside the plant, put them up against a fence like this, and tie them up, use a Florida weave, cheap tomato cage, expensive tomato cage. You want to get your tomatoes up off the ground. By doing that, you won't allow the plant to sprawl on the ground and the fruit to lay on the ground, and by caging them you will increase your harvest by 50%. We didn't Florida weave part of our garden bed last year that had tomatoes in it, and we lost literally 50% of everything that was on the vine because they laid on the ground, slugs, bugs, and rot got a hold of them. So I hope that this has helped you with your tomato planting, whether you've already planted them or you're going to plant them, and that you'll have a successful harvest come later this summer. This is what we've done for many years, and we continue to get magnificent harvests from our tomatoes. Thanks for joining me. Join me again next time for more organic gardening and food preserving. I'm Joy Baird, and this has been the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener.
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.